Hey, welcome to another topic, I guess. This one we're going to start out with fear, but you never know where you'll end up. So many things to be afraid of, right? But fear itself is something you have to kind of come into touch with, because it will take over your life and it will rule your decisions. The reason that religions were created in the first place is because a mind left untended by spiritual experiences tends to be a very erratic one. It's very flexible, and that's a beautiful thing. Imagination is very high in those beings, but also gullibility. And therefore the struggle as to why we have grabbed on to a religion, because we want to be right. We want to be with the correct God. We want to be saved. We want to have the right sponsorship in heaven. And if you don't have that feeling, fear creeps into your life. So that's one reason why those things came and arose out of nothingness. The religion... Hey, good evening. Talking about fear and maybe why we created religion. Because, not to push God aside, but humans created religion. The word comes from religion, as Joseph Campbell, the brilliant scholar, once noted, and that means roots, your roots. Everything goes back to a Latin term. We're such victims of language. I'm not as bad as some, and I'm not patting myself, but we throw around words a lot. And, it makes it worse in English because there's a lot of double meanings. And we take ourselves very seriously in English, nonetheless, sorry. There are children coming through, getting ready to play Dungeons. So fear is of the unknown. Well, for the most part. But it does seem to be heavily rooted in that idea that you're afraid of, it's saying a combat with an animal, whether you will survive, whether things will go poorly for you. Fear comes from not understanding. And so, well, thank you then. So we can agree that without a proper outlet, which people have tried, yoga, meditation, deep breathing, we've even tried to sterilize it, so we have a psychiatric style of medicine. We have other chemicals or whatever, pills, Prozacs, things like that to alleviate, but it's a mindset. If you're not whole feeling, if you're afraid, and fear comes in many little packages. It's do we fear the outcome of getting a pay raise, or do we fear rejection from our family or our wife or our husband, or not being able to pay rent? There's a myriad of fears, and dope. Well, good. Interesting, yes. And so my thought is, well, if you can remove this fear, I I have very few fears. I mean, money is probably my last fear. Well, well, it's easy to say don't do something being over here. You know what I mean? So if what seems doable, I mean, you have to go with your heart. So if your heart tells you go to a doctor and listen to them, then you kind of have to. I've always chosen a more homeopathic style of doctoring. Someone local here, we're very lucky in the region, in the Monadnock region where I live, where there has been some homeopathic. They're both sides. They're trained doctors, but they've also embraced homeopathy or whatever, some type of natural approach. So it kind of gives the responsibility back to the owner of the body, you know, and that's sort of what fear is all about too. You have to take ownership of your own fear. Yeah, it's a good one too. It's a great one. I try not to always think of it as medicine. I'm just kind of a little kid who likes to be recreating, and I mean, obviously I'm no longer a kid, so that's a bit of a delusion, but I don't feel all that sad. I mean, it's the world, you know, I mean, unless for glaucoma or something like that, it's not so much medicine. It's the things that we do can be medicinal, but they can also be a real anchor and weigh you down. You know, and so I try not to go into any of those directions medicinally. I mean, your mind is where you need to feel ease, and a chemical can't alter that to the point where it's going to cure it. It can alter it. It can make it harder or more exciting, but it's never going to come that way. That's discipline. That's control of your senses. That's not being afraid on your first. Ooh, migraines. But you don't smoke butts or anything like that? I mean, for you, maybe yoga would be good because breathing is all of, you know, I mean, we are breath. So, like, your headaches and all things on like that are maybe more on a breath level. And maybe you're almost suffocating. See, well, I smoke too, but I'm not surprised if I ever feel ill. You know. But you know, one of the things Jesus would have said, or Buddha, all those great, wonderful people, is to fast. Is to less. You know, I mean, if you're not feeling well, do less. Not just physically, like touching things, but I mean, I don't believe that we were meant to ingest anything. And the reason we fell from grace, and all the stories imply that, is that we decided, just even simply as the Garden of Eden story tells, is to partake of not just the fruit, but of food at all. I don't believe we're designed to eat at all. I think the word would be breatharians. I don't believe people ate anywhere near the amount we do right now. 2,000 years ago, I think food was very scarce. It was very symbolic. It was shared. It was not very plentiful. And so those things, you know, they all add up. We're now in a state where we really overdo it completely. So
everyone subscribe to this channel now.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys can be quiet.
Oh my! Oh shit! Did I just burn my hand?
Yeah, likely.
Oh man.
Anyway, shh.
He's filming a video for his channel.
Yeah, just give me 15 more minutes.
Oh,
Oh, that was smart.
I'm sorry.
Drop the dog. Wonderful.
I'm sorry. It's okay. Oh my god. Can you just go up in my room and set up on my desk?
Can you just give me 10 more minutes?
Will you play with me about it? Yeah.
I don't know, but just give me 10 more minutes.
I just no, we're gonna
Set up and do your thing. You just don't have to make
Are
a
you
lot of
talking?
noise. Does it seem like I'm talking?
Oh my god.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah, pretty
Well,
policies.
I'm not Richie from Boston, or
Fuck you.
I'm not trying to provide a daily
Alright, good job.
news report, you know what I mean? If I can possibly, I just try to offer some of my insight, and so it's not going to be always, it's going to be pretty sporadic.
Shit's been like a while.
And because of this, even more sporadic. You know, I live in a pretty small space, so it's pretty tough to make noise.
Alright. You guys want some
So
mug
anyway,
cake?
we
You
were
guys want a mug cake?
talking about why
Thanks.
What's a mug cake?
Babe.
they made
Mug
religion,
cake?
Yeah, is that what you said?
and it was because of
Chocolate
fear,
cake
In a mug.
in a mug.
Oh, sure.
security.
It's like,
It
no,
offers
I need
you
anime pussy.
the ability to feel grounded, and you can let some things go, and you can feel comfortable in this world. You can have less fear. And other religions seem to base themselves, well, yeah, that's...
Yo! Yo, 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 yo!
The problem is we all are afraid of dying,
Wait, it's not
and
even
so
made that much.
we're afraid of having worked so hard in our lives that we you know, I have so much art and I have so much of these things. Yeah, well, it does you no good to be afraid. I mean, everything dies. Every single ants and bugs and birds and trees and bushes. It's a cycle.
Can you use real sugar in here?
And so
Sure.
that's certainly somehow. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
I've spent a lot. Here's one that I wish I could see if I can flip that.
Oh my god.
Yeah, for this.
Uh,
This is $1.
Wait, is it like, is it supposed to taste like sugar?
Yeah, there's, yeah.
Casey, quiet down.
Yeah, Casey! Quiet!
anyway. But you know, we want to take everything with us, and we want to believe that we're the person we look like in a mirror. Really? Very cool. Well, I'm glad you like them. I spent a long time, whether was a waste or not, doing all this art. I don't know, but it's, to me, it was more of a meditation. And so, if your daughter enjoys drawing, then that's, I mean, ultimately becoming a Van Gogh or someone famous for it is meaningless. It would be nice to be recognized, and it certainly could happen in your lifetime, but a lot of it for me was letting ideas out and capturing them kind of onto a canvas, and then being able to look back and find maybe that I enjoyed it or didn't. But, you know, each one's a little bit different. There are different ideas that I've gone through. You know, love the history of the world, and I love the suffering that we've all gone through, because suffering is about understanding and less fear. Ever so much less fear. So that's a nice thing, is when you can, you know, feel like that the understanding that you've gathered throughout life has given you somewhat of a backbone to not feel so afraid and not so small. Revelation should make you feel like this is all about you, really. It's your
Just buy some.
yeah, well, exactly.
Would you just ask
It's your ability to be compassionate to the story, attentive to the story. It's all about you. When you close your eyes, there's you, not us. And so this story is about you. And so the things in the outer world, these church shootings or things like that, Vegas, you name it, whatever, 911, they're all distractions. Those are things, yeah, every day is a miracle. Life should not happen at all. This should not be happening. And that's more evidence of God, really. There's no evidence that this could even be possible. Never mind language and the things that we've achieved as humans. And that's pure fantasy and fairy tale. We're just 500 years ago, humans were pulling carts around with horses. And the great achievement was, toilet paper. And our needs haven't changed, honestly. Our needs are all the same. They're the physical needs that we've demanded of ourselves, which, like I say, if we didn't really eat, some of those would even be lessened, but it's, shelter, really, and food, and companionship, and love, things like that, which have slipped by the wayside. We're no longer a very honorable, noble civilization. We romanticized about those things, at least I did, and still do. But our civilization surely doesn't, not as Americans. There's no great romance with nobility or honor or things like that. It's more domineering, more domination, more vengeance. And you reap what you sow on those levels, so that's very difficult.
Cyrus.
What's up?
You should never feel bad.
Mine?
I don't feel bad. This is a test. It's the world we were born into. I'm very careful what I sow, so what I reap is very limited. I do believe people like Jesus came to earth to teach us to do less, not more. And therefore your suffering will decrease. I'm not a recluse by any means, but not the 20-year-old I used to be, where I was very into society and civilization and just really was...
Dad, how much baking powder did you have?
I have no idea. I've never even seen the recipe.
I've seen it, so I pretty much know.
So we all would do better by doing less. Not even just shopping locally and changing the whole fabric of reality that way. I mean, I personally think airplanes should be banned. Pollution should be banned. Things of that nature. But I don't think any of us would travel very far to find happiness. It's usually that when we're forced away from our own space that we're no longer happy. And we're doing things for other people. And so I've tried to make it so I don't have to. I can do my art. I play guitar. I have my little family. And, I mean, I do have to travel. I'm not a magician. I made it all go away. That would be amazing. I'm not sure how that would work. Fukushima is an issue, and if we're to believe it's real, then we're actually all truly doomed. I mean, there's 3 nuclear reactors that have gone down into the earth. Well, we should do that anyway. Plant it everywhere. But if Fukushima is happening, I mean, it's a never-ending thing. Yeah, and it will win out in the end, the plant. It will gain its nobility back again. Unfortunately, it's a world that's kind of ruled by greedy people, so everything is by their terms. And I guess we can hold them
What class starts with this one?
responsible and try to change that. But it seems like a lot of extra work
You know that the fighter doesn't have knowledge local, right?
to have to go after
Some
these
knowledge
people.
engineering.
It's just all about greed to them and money, and
John, did
they have so much
you buy
money
cancer?
and
Did you
they
buy it? Did you start?
they don't share very well.
Your friend.
They taught us to share, and they don't share. That's the problem people are having with civilization. Is what we were taught in
No.
school was actually pretty valuable,
Sorry, so you just bought a.
and I don't regret it at all. I mean, I'm a pretty smart person, but I think we were taught pretty well. But none of the rich people have to follow the rules.
Wait, you got
So-
it supplied, so let me borrow some.
It makes a lot of resentful beings. It makes a lot of people who
I'm going over there, so
would really, you know,
we're not doing D&D this week.
we're drowning in objects and possessions and guitars and cars and light bulbs, and
I don't know.
so much so that we can't sell them all. We would probably destroy things and then have to remake them just because these people have to, you know, our whole cycle of existence and people having to go to work to replicate something that probably is already a billion light bulbs has got to change. We're at that wall where if things don't change, life is doubly meaningless because most of us understand and get it, and we're still stuck in this trap of feeding a bunch of billionaires money and all working and pretending it's all cool. But we're really making nothing of the consequence, and we're not making anything we need. We have plenty of light bulbs. We have millions of miles of electric wire, cutters, and wrenches, and screwdrivers, and we could stop making for a long time and just collect our thoughts and have things to use for hundreds of years.
Which Casey, dude?
No, original Casey.
But the whole system's set to provide for the rich.
The new one.
And until you change that, nothing's going to change. And you're going to have a bunch of people who are raised inadequately in the system, and then they're not prepared at all. They're raised in abusive families, things like that. And
I love being raised in an abusive family.
my son is abusive to me.
Yeah.
You're lucky you weren't abused.
No.
Damn, I just put a bunch of
Osiris.
vanilla
My hand's too
hot dogs
small, it would
everywhere.
hurt.
Osiris.
What's up?
Don't,
Oh! It
don't-
gets you every
But
time.
anyway,
You always
so
think vanilla ice is like this wicked
We
bomb.
could do it, but we have to be a little bit
Every fucking time.
less greedy ourselves, I guess.
Yeah.
We are all very blessed, and so like we need to make sure that
I mean, no, it's local.
big business legislation just doesn't sweep us all away. It's all legit, it's all legal, but I mean, does it really have to even be there? Does insurance really have to exist? Does a middleman have to get in the way between you and a doctor?
Ryan.
For the amount of time you end up going to a doctor once every 5 years? It's a criminal mindset that allows insurance to even exist. You know, you're setting up people to want to abuse the system, whereas in the old days they would have to do things themselves. And so, I mean, that's another source of fear. If you can't do something for yourself and you rely too heavily on people, you're kind of screwed.
I'm gonna have races from Sky.
And so those things need to be, the government needs to be dismantled. Debt needs to be cleared. That was the point of this year in the Jewish calendar. It was the
I'm not even kidding. I almost just dropped
The
2 eggs
Jubilee.
in one mug cake.
50 generations. I forget how it goes. But a certain amount of these cycles, and then at the end of 50 years, all debt is supposed to be cleared. Much too selfish in this world. These people that just have too much power.
Start.
And they've taken over the government, and these people are not even, they've usurped our government in
No,
America.
just eat it like this, dude. I'm kidding, Casey. Why'd you even look at me, Casey?
Well, we will fix this, but I do think we need to stand up.
I wanted to see your face.
I am so sorry to interrupt you.
Don't
I
think he
didn't
is.
notice that I was talking.
Just don't think he is.
You just just don't think so.
Wow. Okay, I don't think I made it.
Well, you walked over deliberately.
No.
And so
This isn't good. Wait, let me see it.
that's the. I'm blessed because that's the type of problem I have in my life.
A small can.
So, pretty mellow, I would say.
That's a small
But
Is it?
you know, I do worry that we're just kind of being steered down this direction where. Because I don't want to be a senator. I don't want to be a congressman. Now that I'm older, I guess, and I don't play rock and roll or whatever, maybe that wouldn't be a bad thing. But I mean, none of us, honestly, none of us good beings want to get involved with the government at all. Doesn't thrill us. Doesn't make us smile to have to think, oh, you know, we have to do it. We hire these people with the hopes that they will be an honest person. And so the problem is we're at that plank wall where maybe us people who really do think correctly need to take over.
That's not good.
And not a bunch of people who are from wealthy families who just are going to basically pass laws to make sure their uncle's business thrives. And I understand the nepotism of it all. I get that. You know, it's nice to support your family. But that is contrary to what's going on in the purpose of the government. That's not what you're supposed to do. It's for your representatives. I mean, otherwise the government isn't supposed to move at all. The Constitution completely covered that. Completely. The Bill of Rights. We should never have amended, well, shouldn't have had to have amended the Constitution too much. Might have been a few things that needed to be clarified, like black people and women. Stuff that humans weren't getting, but I mean, the more we amend it, the crazier it gets, and then it works against us. You no longer have freedoms; things are being restricted. And so, like, the term would be constitutional convention. We need to reassess what's going on. Yeah, what happened to all those new files?
None of us would have knowledge local.
Any new discoveries get made? Everybody's been. I didn't even bother because I feel like they essentially. Well, he's the one who said he was going to free the greenback and put it back in the hands of Congress. And no one's even said they were going to do that since Andrew Jackson. And that's why there are conspiracy theorists. It's because certain people have made these outrageous statements, like Kennedy,
Put it in for a little bit more else. Are you gonna give him knowledge?
the guy after World War II who warned of the industrial military complex. These people
This guy was a failure, though.
were is that just fake? Is that part of the distraction too?
Dad,
Yes.
what part of this fucked up do you think?
He could be a very local person.
You not knowing how to do it.
I watched her do it yesterday, and I did everything the same. Except for the baking powder.
I don't
I'll ask Mom to send me the link, and I'll make it again.
Yeah, you should. Because otherwise it's a waste. And so, when JFK died, they were hitting at the heart of your psyche. Actually, he may not have died. There's a whole realm of reality where people don't necessarily die. If you look into the Beetle phenomena and the Paul is Dead thing, there's a fair amount of evidence that actors are just playing these people, and they're putting on fake prosthesis, and they're just playing the part of JFK. A little bit of extra cheek, and a little bit of this, and you're JFK for the week. And then if they need to talk, they'll bring in the real JFK, or whatever it is, and when they retire you, I don't know, I haven't seen a lot of the effects yet. The only Mandela effect I really recall is the one about Nelson Mandela being dead in the 90s.
I haven't made a character.
I'm not enough with products and things like that, like Ford or different objects in the house. I do believe the Berenstain one was because people, because it's such an awkward word, automatically going to Berenstain.
Guys, let's do this together.
Because there's no, it just doesn't make sense that there's a Berenstain. It just sounds bad. It just sounds wrong. And so I mean, I believe people are, see, what I think is that people are waking up. Oh, which one? Say it.
So for B. Alright.
What one?
Okay,
I
so
could be.
the road. Just do Gregory's first, but he's not offended.
What's your problem?
It's just fun.
Right. And so I believe that there's something partially happening with people is that, see, when you're really young,
Sarah's like the only one I hang out with, so it's okay.
and my son too, and my wife, because she's 10 years younger than me, as you start to wake up as a human,
Can I just soup?
Yeah, Gregory's a fighter.
you know, because now we're in the generation where a lot of people have channels and they're talking about pyramids and signs, right?
And he even said he was a fighter.
You know, there's a sign behind everything, right?
Cyrus, no, shut up.
And so
No, don't change it.
what that is
Don't change it.
certainly throughout time people have used
Keep it. Keep it. No, don't
circles and halos and things of that nature for a reason.
I didn't really think about that.
Cyrus,
No, it's fine.
Jonah, put it back.
And no one's done it more than, say, the Freemasons and groups like that where,
Back when you had time dinner.
well, you know, they have the compass and the,
No balls.
you know, like the ruler or whatever. They're mathematicians, they're architects, they're artists. And so they're needing to come into terms with all these geometries. They call it sacred geometry. I actually picked up a pretty interesting book the other day.
Fucking an animal.
And so it's all different, you know, like all of the Platonic solids and Pythagoras, the theorem of Pythagoras, and so they're all these, you know, objects and
7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
like a triangle.
God damn, why the monkey pick up?
1, 2, 3, you know, 3 points, like the Trinity. And so they started to think about these things, and they started to say, oh, well, it's, we can, you know, like we can start to, anything with 3 points
That's 10, 13.
we'll call a tribe.
Cyrus,
And anything with 2, it'll be bi. And 1 will be uno, you know, and then,
Oh, such a dude.
well, because the I is synonymous with understanding. And so, I mean, even though you have 2 eyes, you see with a single image. You know, like, you see it all. Like you don't see like over there and over here. I mean, and so, but it also the eye in the the triangle is just another geometry where one fits inside the other, and that's how they divide certain shapes. And so they can say it's a regular polygon, or they can say it's this type of thing by the amount of times it could touch. Well, the spiritual eye is your mind. That's understanding. That's when you get it. That's the translation into understanding, your spiritual eye. Your physical eye is the conduit. And in fact, science has already said that reality is invisible. It's all molecules and atoms, and they have absolutely no color whatsoever. That's what's reflected back and forth between your brain and your eyes. And, you know, that, right? And so those things are just happening as synapses. And then the inner eye is your actual mind going, oh, 2 plus 2 is 4. Yes, it is. It's all in your head. And that's why I said earlier, this is really all for you. Like if you close your eyes, you're the only being that really exists. We are nothing to you at that point. And that's the true state of existence, is you with your eyes closed, using your third eye, your mind, to think, not to see. There's nothing to see. You know, there's things to see, but is a pencil any more important than a ruler? Because it's true. Or is it? I mean, I've always had a problem throughout life being like, well, you know, some things are like apples and oranges. It is fun. Well, what we do know is that math was made by humans. And since either we're perfect or we're not, it's as perfect as we are, or it is not. And so, you know, some of the other thinkers, like Aleister Crowley, was looking back at some of these esoteric teachings, and what he was noticing is that a lot of the older school philosophies were considering, you know, like the one as a unit, as its own thing.
A Middle Eastern name.
And not just a number like we throw around nowadays, but it's a thing. And two, well, two isn't like one. Two isn't necessarily just two ones. It's its own thing. And three, and so on to 9. And 0 wasn't invented until nearly the time of Jesus by the Arabs. We use, in America and most of the world, the Arabic numeral system. This is not a British thing, this is Arabic. No. Not all the time.
Cheeto diet.
He was trying to,
Cake recipe, chocolate.
but that's a spiritual idea that doesn't necessarily always manifest.
It's MIA.
And
Okay, let me check it.
I mean, the idea of the devil is also just like a misguided thought. So it's whether
I'm doing the shits, right?
he looked for it or not. Well, right, exactly. To the source. He wrote just as much about Jesus and God as many theologians. He was only interested in the truth, and he found a very dark truth. No, it worked.
Should I go full?
Well, he started going down the path of the self-realization means that I'm God.
Where's your character sheet?
Huh?
Character sheet.
And so
Oh, it's right here.
it's a great thought, but it does tend to be a dead-end road, even if it's true. It doesn't lead anywhere. So he was pretty dissatisfied by the end results. I think he was probably more looking for a fabulous way to find God than just kind of found himself and said, at the center of all things. But that was because he was studying the Phoenicians and all of these ancient cultures, the Buddhists, the Hindu. They believe that if you go through illumination, you'll realize that God is everything. So he was learning from these people anyway, and he just it didn't give him any satisfaction. Well, absolutely. Well, they want the glory. They want to be the ones who make sense. They want to be the one. I mean, the funny thing in Freemasonry and things of those nature, the Aleister Crowley groups, is it's all done through degrees. And so it would take you a lifetime to even come to any type of information that they thought was even worth telling you in the first place. It's just not worth it. It's kind of like taking the very, very long way to God and all the way around. A lot of fancy poetry, but there's just as much spit and venom. So in the end, all that Aleister Crowley really did contribute was fear. Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, there are good people who are doctors and all sorts of different professions. A mason's just another image. The key is you're not good because you're a mason or a doctor or a priest. The it's just an image. I'm a house painter.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't really mean I'm a good house painter or a bad house painter or blah, blah, blah. You know, it's just an image. So Freemasons, there are plenty of good... I mean, it's a brotherhood thing, and it's also a philanthropy thing. Very few of the brothers who ever join probably ever want to know anything of any real secretive value. I mean, they're just satisfied throwing $50 into the pot and saying, "Oh, you know, I'm part of. I'll go every once a month and be a part of a fraternity or whatever." Some people, like the main character of Hellraiser in the beginning, who's grabbed the box, or Faust. You know, Goethe's Faust. Is they're not satisfied with anything, and they're going to scour the entire universe until they find the truth. And so, like I say, Aleister Crowley was one of those guys, and he just found himself. And
what can I do and what can't I do?
So just write down what it says. So you're fine.
I mean, I knew a guy who joined, and it's because he just wanted more information. So I don't know if that's a nice thing either, you know what I mean? Just try to join the ranks, and then, you know, I mean, it's really like for old dudes with money, you know, you go and you hold charities, and, you know, hopefully you're not a creeper too. It's not for a 30-year-old guy. I mean, it is if you're really desiring to know this Freemason knowledge, I guess, but nowadays online, you can get anything that they possess just looking it up online. And so it's not the 1930s anymore. In the 1930s, in fact, there were no signs around good luck even knowing who these beings were. And so they were more secretive then, and I don't really... I mean, they say they have the great work, and yeah, exactly, connections. And that's what it's about, too, you know what I mean? Anywhere you are, you do the correct handshake, and then you can come in the club and have a beer, and they'll fix your motorcycle, and you're on your way, or whatever, you know? You've paid your dues. But to me, that's more mafia, and... I mean, I don't know if that's, you know, what it wasn't like just hanging out with Jesus, you know, everybody protects everybody, you know? If it's your good friend, and you're proud of them, and proud of the beings that you are, you know, you're going to protect them. You know, I don't... When I think of the evil clan who's ruined the world, I don't think of the Freemasons. There were people in that group who were definitely Freemasons, but they were also Order of the Eastern Star and the OTO and the Boy Scouts, and there were lawyers and doctors and people who were never members of anything. It's all about money and greed, so... They just made a pact because they had the family money a long time ago. Oh, it won't be long now. Jesus is definitely coming soon. But I do think you have to meet him halfway. And you have to realize that he's found inside your being, and it's a part of your awakening. So it's not something that's separate from...
I'm actually going to start keeping track of levels and stuff, Cyrus.
Yeah.
It won't be a place. It'll be a part of you. And you will be transformed into... Because Jesus is before everything. Jesus is the during, and Jesus is after everything. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for us. So you have to reconnect with Jesus, because Jesus is everything. And so that's, you know, that's part of that awakening, the apocalypse. Apocalypsos, the Greek, it's understanding. It's your third eye. It's not third eye, it's your mind. Like, I get it, you know. Of course you'll have happiness, you'll be with God. So that's...
I hate my fucking life. It's my fucking passion, dude.
That's a brilliant thing. Oh,
Just trying to be nice, make some people some mud cakes for now.
oh no. Cooking disaster. Look out.
I think you're good for racial traits.
Made 3 things of butter for the thing. Bring them over. Everywhere. Okay,
Did it work?
Well, I get to eat mud cakes.
Isn't that a beautiful thing? Yeah.
What?
Jesus is my favorite person.
John, get the thing away.
not just trying to look like him. No, I just appreciate his mindset, his ability to
Add your 2 tablespoons.
kind of put an Aikido spin on every bad situation and put the mirror back on you. And so then you have to face yourself. Well, you have to surrender. You are not in control of this situation. It may seem like it. There may be moments where you feel like you're in complete control, but that is a complete illusion. Jesus has the wheel.
Should be the thing that adds to the story.
No, dude, not
As
yet.
long as
I'm
you
saving it,
accept
my guy.
and start to nourish that
Feller.
friendship
Saving it, my fella.
and
Saving it so you
parental,
can
whatever you, that understanding you have,
Oh, yeah.
the better he'll take care of you. But it's not you that does anything physically. I mean, I guess a little bit, but I mean, it's really by the grace of God, you know. But I find that's also because I don't really ask a lot.
Coconut flour.
And to me, what I have, even though it's very small compared to some people, it's still overwhelming. It's still a lot. I still feel very blessed and also like I have too much.
2 tablespoons. Oh, that's this, right?
Yeah. Big one.
Exactly. Only faith in God. But that's the idea of turning the other cheek. Or whatever you have to
Sarah, how do you
just...
calculate hit points?
I mean, Jesus said, I'm here
How do you calculate hit points? Like,
to
use a
serve.
napkin, don't use a paper towel.
Why?
And he's gone.
It's not gonna help as much as like a towel.
We were all supposed to follow his example explicitly. And I'll say it again.
Is he a fighter again?
And I'm married or whatever, but I mean, ultimately, if I had been smart, I wouldn't have had a child. And I just would have followed him completely
Just get it like nice
and tried to have been just like Jesus.
Still can be like 1 minute.
Which is kind of scary. But,
Like that's literally all.
I mean,
you
now
need
that I
is
have
1
what I
minute.
have, and I've woken up
'Cause the
again,
butter is already.
it is what I have. But, and I need to take care of it. But ultimately, he wanted us all to not have
Oh, it's too late.
wives or husbands or sex or anything. And go right to
Oh, it's
God
good.
and put all your energy into God. And you'd be rewarded tenfold. Because you'd have so little complications in your life.
Joe,
The
they're gonna
more
be gone,
friends you
okay?
have, the bigger your family gets, the
I'm making them just like
more
my
your
mom.
mind gets stretched, the more worry you have. Those are all natural. But if you had been more like Jesus, your worries would only have been more about God and serving God. Less karma, less problems. You know, the Taoist master Lao Tzu said, do nothing and leave nothing undone.
Skills.
Yeah, I can't copy off of this because it's insert.
Which is to say, when I start a picture, I should not be disappointed if I don't finish it.
Not really.
That pressure can be removed by starting nothing completely. If you must. If you're the type of person that gets disappointed easily. If you don't, I don't get disappointed by the things I do. There might be a thing or here or there, but I mean, if it's a drawing or something, I don't. But, you know, if I want less of that disappointment, I should do less. And then I would leave things the way they were in the universe. Well, I know Sophia, what's pistis?
We were supposed to do half a teaspoon.
Sophia is the Greek goddess knowledge. Pistis. I mean, I can look it up. What's P-I-S-T-I-S? Well, see, now, all the Greek gods were... See, in the old days, they divided the kingdom of those gods, into masculine and feminine. Because, essentially, a human being is split right down the middle and is half a man and half a woman. And so, and the old people 10,000 years ago knew this, and so they created all the gods as like a family, hierarchy of a family. Zeus and Hera, their children, and then those children who messed with humans, and then demigods, so things like that. So, Sophia, but they also had elemental attributes and attributes of philosophy or attributes of wisdom,
It's called Westwood.
things of that nature. So, like Klothos, Lachos.
No, that's where you grow
Yeah,
up.
it's all a Gnostic learning, like Manly P. Hall's The Secret Teachings or whatever. That's just a collection of 10,000 years of understanding of.
Casey Craig.
And here's the crazy thing is, like Osiris, Isis, and Horus. Well,
Elsewhere. Just elsewhere.
Is that wait,
Odin,
Tamriel is in the game.
Frigga,
I know. Is it elsewhere?
and
or
Thor.
Elsewhere.
Jesus, Mary,
Still elsewhere.
Joseph. Like there's trilogies everywhere. These are lessons we've learned throughout time
Such a weird name.
that you can't, as long as we're trapped into humanity and reality, man, woman, and child is the triad,
It's kind of far away from.
and that is wisdom.
Eastfall, though.
That is the fruit of wisdom. There's 1, 2 to get together, and then the fruit of wisdom is 3. The pyramid.
I'm so pissed. I
The
just
most
wanted
stable
to hide the flyer, Joe. I just wanted to die.
universal
In a big
structure
fire.
there is. And so,
Come here, Donna.
as the numbers get bigger, they say you're more grounded,
No, just look
but
at
you're
this.
more earthy. And so it's, in a way, less stable. It's more physical.
Alright, well, just look at this. You guys are
The
fine.
3 is the base. 4 is
Why would you recommend?
like
He
more
was like,
complicated. 5 is even more, but it's less stable. 6.
Here.
And so,
No, it's too hard.
Just like
that's the beauty of our language, even in Jesus being the word. Sophie, philosophy. Yeah, lately I've been seeing 11:11 a lot. Well, actually, every time I turn on this damn device, I
It should
see
turn out good. I did it. Trust me.
707, 101, 11:11,
Looks fine.
606,
Wait, I forgot to show you.
505, 555. It's always, anytime I turn it on, it's always on a comedy. But that's all gematria, and I don't really get too heavy into gematria. I mean, I have some books on it. 777, yeah, that's a great number. Jesus is 888.
This is yours.
777 is just below Jesus, and I could look it up for gematria. But it's a good number. 666 being Satan, your animal. I guess 777 would be pretty much the balance.
Where's my sugar?
211, 311, 411.
Christmas, after Christmas.
And so you could look those up. Look up. There's a gematria calculator online. You can type in those. Remember how everyone was getting into 923? So I typed in my name into the gematria calculator, and it said, well, my name, Brian Murray, equals 923.
Casey, here. Okay, now mix it. Yeah, it should
And
turn
so
out.
to hundreds of other words. So it doesn't really. It's fun, but I mean, it doesn't really matter. It's.
It should turn out like actual people this though.
I
Mine's too wet.
think that was the way they were see, that came out of Hebrew. Hebrew letters equal numbers, and that was a way maybe for them to hide messages. Divining things doesn't work really well. I think what's happening for us in the end of this world is the good book the Revelations of John the Divine have been around so long that
That's just fine.
they actually are fulfilling prophecy for us.
Oh, yeah, it's fine. Alright.
They're not going to wait for God, but God's just going to let them do it,
This is mine. I'll make mine first.
and they're going to try to rush this whole thing through, and they're going to try to manifest all the different scenarios that are required to make it all happen.
And she flat out said no.
Because in this reality, they're just they rush too much.
Did you give
They
reasons?
She's like,
they can't
like,
wait.
The only reason she really gave me was
It's because it says, ironically enough, it's a wicked generation that looks for signs, and I agree in a way. I mean, really, what do you? It's like that statement. Would you really, if you knew the day you were going to die, would you really be excited about it? Yeah, they need to chill. Is right. Because I don't think life's really that bad, and I don't feel like ending the world would be to anyone's real benefit. You know, so but I do believe that's what they're plotting. And actually, Ayn Rand wrote a book on it. She was dating one of the Rothschilds. It's called Atlas Shrugged. And it's about how the rich people get together and they collapse society. See, because it doesn't affect their wealth at all when they collapse society. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, they're looking to make multiple disasters. Well, that literally is they're trying to break the firmament that's holding us from getting into outer space. CERN is about trying to leave this planet. There's a huge amount of documentation back in the 1940s. Forgive me, I don't recall the name of it, but they launched 40 or 50 nuclear warheads at the sky, and they all reached about 12 miles and couldn't go any further and blew up. And they did that for 6 or 7 months because they were trying to break through the firmament into outer space, and they couldn't. And so that's always been an issue, and I think CERN is about them being able to leave Earth. They're not ready for when Jesus comes back, and the rocks won't be big enough to hide them.
Yeah. Mine is wired than that.
Exactly. They'll be gone.
What's the guy?
But that ain't never gonna happen.
Jonah, where's your cake?
It's not the way the story goes.
This one right here.
The story is written now, but I do believe because we all have free will, we are going to be participating in the end results of how it all goes down. Via pollution, nuclear reactors, all sorts of terrible things, weapons. Most people are so primitive and barbarian like that. You know, we're this close always.
Here it is. This is kind of what it looks like. It's like
They're counting on it, and yeah, I don't know what gave them the thought that they could escape.
Do you not know his name yet?
So, you know, even Jim Morrison had this to say, you know, nobody gets out of here alive. And he was just a drugged up loser. But he got it. You don't really... Exactly. But see, now, if you don't understand God, then you don't get that. Because you'd be very afraid. I mean, the things that they do. You know, I do think it takes some understanding to obey God. Some type of... It's not a contract. I mean, you just get it. You're afraid. You're like, God, it's like Santa Claus times 10. Always knows what I'm doing. But that's not why I don't do bad. You know, that's the irony, is that has literally nothing to do with why I do bad. Now, it's funny, I was thinking, you know, the New World Order everyone is afraid of, where everybody is under surveillance.
Jesus Christ! Look at that! Look at that! Look at that one!
I guess he won't be in heaven with me, but...
Look at that!
So I was thinking, not too long ago, now heaven, you can't be bad in heaven, right? So like that's kind of like a police state. And I don't mind. I really don't do anything bad that I know of. I do smoke weed and cigarettes, but I'm working on it. You know, I'm getting better all the time. But like,
Dad,
so.
prepare for more. It's not creamy enough. But just.
Oh God. This is the temple of God. You're supposed to treat it really good. So, my thought is anyway that what people are afraid of in the New World Order is that it's a surveillance thing, right? You'll be watched. Why should that matter to you if you're doing nothing wrong?
Good. You need to.
Because that'll be a lot like heaven.
What?
Absolutely. Oh, well, yeah, all these plants are legit. That's what you choose to do with anything that really makes you obsessive or compulsive or abusive. You know, so I do wonder about people worrying about the police state in this. Nice. Good job. You know, the police state, because that's just, it's holding people culpable to being good. If you are doing nothing wrong, then a camera, I mean, if you didn't know that your TV is watching you, then you're a fool, because it is.
Well, then let me make some more.
My wife's done it. It's been 2 months for her. I'm about to go for it. Winter's a good time to do it. I'll just crawl into a snowbank and hibernate for a little while. But no, it'll be fine. I got a couple years out of it. I think I'm good for now. No, I'll definitely pull it off. I'll live stream the whole experience.
Look at that. You carry
Destroying the cigarettes.
Wait.
Every time I nick fit, I'll live stream. No, but I'm better for that, that's for sure. It's,
Dude, Greg's is fucking.
I've often said to myself, boy, you know, I've said it to myself a million times. This is the temple of God,
Should I
my
make
body,
Greg fucking black and awesome?
my being.
No.
Black.
Dude,
And
Greg's son.
you know, God's
sunny.
going to be, or Jesus is going to be a little bit upset, and the condition I return is vehicle.
Casey, Sonny is badass.
But you know,
Pretty sure Sonny is a fucking.
hopefully he's not too upset that he won't let me park it in the garage and
My mom's friend.
join him in the feast of the wedding of the Lamb. 'Cause I do care so much for him and for all his children. No, but I mean the problem is the more you know about that thing, the sillier it seems when you do stupid shit. You're just not being responsible for your being, so you need to, like I said, do less, so you just make sure you're not really, because then it's just about me even looking back at myself and saying, well, I didn't really need to be like that, you know. I'm smarter than that, I know more than that, so it's kind of silly, but
Dude, I only took how long? Like 35 minutes to make fucking 3 more cakes.
we are improving all the time, so that's the beauty of it, and it's good people like you and I who, you know, kind of keep the whole world afloat. And that's why, you know, it is a good place. We're sharing good ideas and trying to, you know, make the world a better place. And and admitting that you're just growing. You're not. Jesus is perfect. I'm not, and so I'm on the road to looking for it, and that's the best I can do. And that's all he really asked, is that you stay on the road looking for him and staying with him. And so that's, you know, my kind of life preserver in this madness. So I don't really have fear on that level. That's, you know, it was a long time ago that I wanted a gravestone or to be remembered in this existence, but now I don't even believe in this existence, and for the most part, that way at all. It's nonsense. You know, I could pursue art or guitar, but it really is just, even if it gave glory to God, it's meaningless to me. It's just not. It's nothing.
It's not as good as my hentai porn, but
living is enough. It's and being and just being spontaneous and good and being alive. It's a good idea. Anyway, I'm going to bail. It's been 64 minutes, and thank you for joining me.
Why don't you make it sunny?
Greg's a fucking.
He'll never leave
always
you.
in the sunshine.
He never leaves us.
Sunrise.
Just always be cheerful and helpful, and
Sun spots.
thanks for joining me. And, you know, like, it'll all work out. If you just let him drive the car,
Don't eat your fingers.
we all get home. Thanks.